Welcome back, tech gurus and newbies. So today's video we're going to talk about how to create database helper class and also create singletons and how to create functions for insert, fetch, update, and also delete as well. Good. So let's get started. So here in our lab, let's create another package in the lib folder. Yes. Let's create another package called the utilities, but short utils. Then inside this we're gonna have another file that is gonna be the name of the database helper. Okay, so database underscore helper.dat. Okay, helper.dat. All right, perfect. So let's work in that file. Let me close this. Okay, good. So we are in the database helper.dat, and inside here, as I said, we're gonna look at how to create the database helper class, and we'll also look at the singleton and all that. Good. So to get started, we have to start by including our packages here. That is, so we have to first import our package for the SQFLITE, right? So we start with the package, and this package will be the SQFLITE. So SQFLITE, so we go package SQL. SQFLITE slash SQFLITE.dat. Perfect. Then we will have our import for the Dart asynchronous programming. Okay, so that async, and then we will have import for the file controller. That is the import that IO. So this one, import that. This one control the file system. So we need to also import that, and then we also need to import our path. That is, so package, and then we have the path, package path underscore the provider slash path. Path underscore provider dot dat. Path underscore provider dot dat. Okay, then we'll also import our note.dat in here. So the note.dat here, this one, we import this one. Okay, so let's import our packages. Then this package will be Flutter app. No, this package will be our inside the my stateful widget. No, stateful app rather. Stateful app, and then we have a slash. Is it in the screen? Slash model. What's the name? Yeah, the name is model. Yeah, that is perfect. Model. Then inside the model we have this one. Okay, perfect. So we have all our imports set. The next thing is to create the class. That is the class helper. So class, and then this will be the database helper. Database helper. Yes. So we have this set. So inside the database helper, we need to have our singleton variable. So we use the static, then the database helper here. Good. So just the name of the variable. Then this will be static database helper. No, database helper. Oh, too much H here. Okay, good. Database helper here, and then we terminate this. So why do we have to have this? This is simple. A singleton. Singleton means this database will be created once in a lifetime of our application. So we call this the singleton. Means only once in the life of the application. It will only create this database once. That is the meaning of this. And then we're gonna have another static database, and we're gonna create that soon. Static database. Yes, and then that will be underscore database. Excellent. Then I terminate this. Okay. So inside our database class, we're gonna also have we're gonna define the table column variables. How do we do that? By having our return types, that is the name of the database. That will be note table, okay, note table, and then note table will be equal to our note table as a variable. So the name of the database is actually what? Note underscore table. Good. That is the name we'll give it to it, right? So we have this as a variable, and then we have the name of the table. So let's create another one. Another one will be the what? The column ID. That is the column of the ID in our table. So we call it, let's simply shorten this and then call it the column, but column short. We have shortened the column, so column ID, and then this will be equal to the ID itself in the table. Okay, so ID like this. No, let's leave it small letters. Okay, good. Then the next will be for the title. We need to also have the column for the title. Okay, so let's call title Okay, then the next will be, we'll also have the description as well. Description for this. So description will also be string, and then the string what? Call description. Okay, description, and that will also be here. Description. Okay, good. And then what will be the next one? Will be the priority, right? So that one will also be string for the table. So priority, priority. Okay, good. So then we have this, then it will be equal to this here, priority here as a field in the database. Then the last one will be the date. So column of date, and then is equal to the date. Okay, it's equal to the date. Okay, then I terminate. Perfect. Okay, so we got this set. Next is we need to look at the database instance. But to do that, we need to create what we call the database instance, and this database instance will have a return type of factory, and this factory is used in order for us to have a return from, or a value return from our database helper. So we use the factory keyword, and then we use the name of this database, yes, here. So the database function. Okay, so database helper, and then our function comes like this. Good. So in here we're gonna have a check here to check if the database is empty or if it's not empty. So what will we do here? We use if statement to check this. So we said if the database helper that we have defined here, the single thing, this database helper, if this is null or is empty like this, now if it is null, that means it's empty. Okay, what should we do? If it's empty, let this, if it's empty, then the database helper should be equal to our database helper, and this database helper should create, if it is empty, the database helper should create an instance of this. So we use the underscore create instance, and that will be initialized at the top. Instance. Okay, so create an instance if it's empty, instance of this database. Okay, so this is only for creating this single thing object once, and this needs to be initialized here. So this same, no, should be initialize here. Perfect. So if we say our database is empty, then the database helper should create a new instance of the database. That is the meaning of this. And then we need to return after it has created. Since we want to return, we need to use the factory keyword because we will be returning the object inside the instance of the database. So we use the return database dot helper. Yes, this one. Need to clear this. Underscore database, return this one, yes, here. Perfect. Okay, so we'll be returning the database helper if the database is actually empty. Okay, so if it is empty, then what are we gonna do next? What we're gonna do next is to simply do what? Look at the initialization of the database, that is using the feature and await to check and then return what is actually inside the database. Okay, so in here let me have a let me see, this one is here. Is here if then return. Okay, okay, good. So next we look at the feature and the await and the sync, because the database, we need to actually use the feature API to await for the creation of the database, and then we also need to also assign the object in the database to the feature API. Okay, we studied the feature API in our previous video. So this is the getter of the database with the feature API. So database async means when it is synchronizing or it's using the asynchronous programming, we need to use what? The feature what? API here. So what is gonna happen here? If our database is equal to empty, so underscore database is equal to null, that is empty, then what should happen? Then our database should wait for its initialization, that is here. So this is the meaning of this. Wait for the database to be created, so wait for it before it initializes. So initialize database. Good. Then we terminate this. Okay, so this is what the getter for our what? Database awake feature. And then what we're gonna do next is to look at our future await as well. So for the future await, we need to return this database, since it's taking the return type of what? Of the database. So here we need to have a return of what? Underscore database here, this one. Okay, then what next? Next is we need to also look at the database initialization for the path at which it will be created on our what? On our Android or iOS application. So we use the, after it has initialized, we need to also look at the path at which this database will be what? Will be saved at on our what? On our file system, either on our Android or our iOS device. So how do we do that? is similar to this, like very similar to this, but this should be the future instantiation of this one. So we're gonna have our instantiation here, and then this is also gonna return the database in the future. So we have this, this, and then it's also gonna use the async and wait, because it's gonna wait before it performs a task. Okay, so let's watch here. Here we get the path of where our database will be stored. Yes, so the path for both Android and then iOS. So here we are basically looking at the path where our database will be stored on the device. So path for, let's say, both what both operating system, so both OS. So it can be Android or it can be what, iOS. So we use the directory, and then this is being provided by the directory package for us. So we use the directory here, and this directory, and then we also have the variable of what directory here, and then this directory will be also equal to awaiting for what, awaiting to get our path, get application what, path. Okay, so get application documents application documents directory. So just simple as this directory. Okay, perfect. Then I terminate this. So this initialize database will also make sure it checks our directory where our database is gonna store on our devices. Okay, so this will be the path await get application document directory. Okay, good. And this is provided by our what, path package that we imported at the top. So the path should actually be the path should actually be returning a string path, that is the string, and then the string will basically be like a URL of the path. Okay, so path will be equal to this directory. So this directory here appended to the path, and then this path will be what, this path should be named like this, Note.db. so we are assigning the kind of name that it needs to be stored on our what, on our device, this way. Good. So this is the path, and this part should await for us to get this what, directory to the what, URL on our what device, and then this path should return in a string format, but the directory.path should create a name of the database on our device called note.db. Good. So not note.db. Next is we'll look at, after we have found the path, or we have created the path for our database, what is next? Next is we should look at opening or creating the database. So if the database already exists, then open for us. If it's not there, then do what? Create for us. Create the database if it is not already there. That is the name of the database, right? So create or open for us here, and then so we simply say create or open path for our database. Very simple. Okay, so in here, how do we do that? We do that by creating a var or a variable with the note what database, and this should be equal to our open database path. So we say, okay, we'll be awaiting for the path to open, and so let's await, and then open. We use the open database here. So open database, and then open database, we're gonna have the path that we already created here, the path, and the path, and also look at the version. Every database needs to have the version of the database. So since it will be once, so it will be just a one version. And then for that, we need to call the onCreate. When there is no database, the onCreate will help us create that database. And to create the database, we need to have another function that will help us create the database that we'll be writing in a second. So that function will be called create what? Create DB. Let's give it create DB or create database. Okay, perfect. Then we terminate this. After that, we need to return our note data. Okay, so note data, this one needs to return, because it needs to return a value back to our application. So we say return note database. Okay, I terminated this. Perfect. So here, since if the path is not already on our device, whether iOS or Android, then this function will help us open the database based on the path here, using this path keyword here. And then we also have to have the version of the database, and if the database has not been created, then it can't be open. It needs to use the onCreate to create the database first before it opens. So we need to create this function to help the database created if it is not already on our device. Okay, so how do we do that? To do that, we need to simply use the SQL queries to create our database when we have not initially instantiate our singleton function. Okay, good. So let's do that. So to create a database using the SQL language, we need to first have this inside the function. Okay, so let me call this the create that we have here on create needs to fall on this function to create that. So we have this here, and then we're gonna have a SQL language in here. So here it takes a parameter of the version and the database, and it goes this way: database, that is our DB. Okay, DB, and for our DB we need to have the version. So version is an int, and then the int, then the name of the name of our parameter to hold the version. So we'll call this new version. Okay, new version. Perfect, like this. Okay, so new version. This is also using the future API that is using the asynchronous, and for inside our async, we're gonna have our await in here. So when it synchronizes, let's wait for it to finish creating our what table before we receive the values. But to do that, we need to use the await. Then this parameter will be appended to our database what queries, that is db.execute. So this is a simple SQL database queries we're gonna write. Okay, so here inside our SQL, this is where the command it's gonna be. So follow me as we create the table itself. So for the SQL, we're gonna have first, we write our normal SQL language, and we're gonna use the create database, create table. First, we have to create our table. Okay, so which table are we gonna create? We're gonna create our note table. So how do we do that? First, this is a normal SQL we're gonna create, so we need to pay critical attention to this. So we have a create table, and to create the table, we need to use this $sign here. This is a normal SQL, so you need to pay attention to this. Then SQL of what? Our note table. Note, and we have already defined this up there. So note table, okay. So for our note table, what should be inside our note table? What should be here will be our what? Our ID, our title, our description, and then the priority and the dates. Okay, so let's do that right away. So for our note table, we're gonna have let me pay attention to this note table. So for our note table, we will have the columns. So for the columns, we'll have first the column ID. The column ID, we already have this at the top, the column ID. And the column ID needs to be an integer, right? This column ID, and this needs to be an integer, so we use the cap integer, and then integer, and this will be the primary what key, and this will be auto incremented. Okay, auto increment. Good. So we are creating our SQL in a raw format. So auto increment. Next will be our what? Our column. For this column, start with small letters. So our column for our title. Column for title. Perfect. And then for our title, it's gonna be what? Test instead of int, test. Okay, that is the column title. Okay, test. So what's next? after our tests, we'll also have our column description. Okay, this same column description. Wait, let me take this off. After that, I add it. Column description. So after our tests, let's have column description. Oh, this needs to be only big D description here. Column description. What's next? Our next table column, and this should be test. Our next table column will be what? Will be the priority, and that one will be what? Integer as well. So column, then we have column priority. Okay, priority. And for the column priority, it's gonna be integer. So integer. Oh, this always needs to be what? Small letters. Okay, but the first word is P, priority, and this will be what? Integer. Okay, perfect. After this being an integer, we also have the date, and the date will be test. Okay, so let me break this one down. And the date here, column date will be what? Date, and this will be what? Test. Perfect. Okay, so we have our column ID, column title, column description, column priority, and then the column date, and that is what? A test. So let me end this here, and then I have one comma here. Okay, let me check this very well. So this is for this, and then the create. Let me look at the create table. So the create have this create table, note table, then we have a column ID, integer primary key. Okay, and this is auto increment, and then we have the column title is text, and then we have a title is tests. Okay, then we have the description, here description, and then the description is also test. So here, let me bring this on the same line. Yeah, making sure everything is fine. So description will also be here. Okay, so description here, and description test, column integer. After integer, we have the column date, and then the date. All right, good. So that is for our SQL. Okay, so after our SQL, what are we gonna do? We're gonna have the fetch. That is a fetch function to actually fetch all the details in here. Okay, good. So let's go down and then create our fetch function. So this is actually gonna fetch all operations, yes, in here, and we're gonna get the what we're gonna get is the what, the object, the note. We're gonna get all the note object, okay, all the note object from our database. Okay, database. Good. So that is the fetch. So for us to do the fetch, we need to simply use the feature database here. That is the feature API. And then so here, but here we don't return this. We need to return and convert it into the map, because we said our objects are only readable and accepted using the map object in our SQFLITE database. So here, the fetch needs to be converted into lists, and then the list needs to be also converted into the map object. So we use the map here like this, map, and the map also needs to have a return type, and that return type will be a string. The return type of the object should be a string. That is the default what, the default table column names should be a string, and then the return type for the other data inside the database can be dynamic, because it should hold both int and then also what, string at the same time. Then we have the get note map list. Okay, we are converting all the objects into the map, the normal note object into the map object for our SQLite to actually read the data inside our database. Okay, so we use the async and then async wait, and what are we gonna wait for? We're gonna wait for our database query for fetching here. So first we need to have a database DB that we have at the top should await for what? Await for our info inside what? Our database, that is database, this dot database. Okay, good. Then I terminate this, and then next we should have the result in a variable, that is result, and that result needs to be appended to our await, and await should have our DB query, and we're gonna use the raw query. We can use the database helper, or we can use a raw query. So let's use this raw query, and in here we need to write the SQL raw query, and that will be using the select command. So we're gonna use select all, and all we use the star, select all from our note database. Okay, so note table, from our note table here. And what are we selecting? We're selecting all what? All info from our note table, and then we're gonna order the details by, we're gonna order it by using the column starting from our priority. Okay, so column priority, and it's gonna be in ascending order. Perfect. So this should be our result when we query for our database. You should select all from our note table in this order, from the column priority and in the ascending order. Okay, then next query. Our result should also look at this. look at this await again, or await, but no, not await. We need to only return this result. Return the result. Perfect, like this. So we return the result in this way. Okay, but we can do this in different ways. Okay, this same query we have here, this we are using the raw SQL database, but what if we want to use the helper? How would that look like? It will be the same, but here we're gonna have the db dot query, and the query will be small letter when we are using the database helper here, like this. And then we are not going to use the select, but instead we're going to use the note table, just like this. So another way of doing it, using the helper, the database helper, we have included we call the note table here, just like this. And then we can also assign the order by starting from our, now let me use the single quote, starting from the same column in the ascending order. So different ways of getting the same results, like this. This we use the database helper, and this we are using the raw SQL database queries. So these two are the same, so we need to comment on one. So let me comment on the first one, just demonstrating how to do this in a different way. Okay, now let's look at our insert operation. So here is the fetch operation. The next one will be insert operation. Okay, so insert, how to do the insert operation on our database. So here, insert, and what are we gonna insert here? We're gonna insert let's say insert we're gonna insert a note. So here we're gonna insert a note object to our database. So all object will be sent through our database using this command. Okay, here, so we have, let's create our insert function here, and for here it's gonna be similar like this, but here we'll use the future here, and then for the future here we'll be having int as our return type, because insert needs to check our ID and the rest. Okay, so let's look at here. Insert, we use the insert note, and this would take a parameter of our note as the name, and then the note as a as an argument. Then we have our async and wait in here. So insert note, what are we going to insert? We need to insert the note in the database, and then this database is our DB, and the DB is equal to our await, and await should be pointed to this dot database. Perfect, like this. Okay, then we need to have our result. After we insert, what should be the result? The result should be equal to await, using the await keyword, our db, that's the variable up there, our db dot our insert command, insert, and we need to insert into the table, and then we need to have the value. And what is our table? Our table is called note table, small letters, note table. That is the table. And which values? The value that we have, that is the object, needs to be converted to the map object for our SQFLITE to understand. So we need to do this. Our data or object from our note should be converted to our map object, just like this, dot to map. Excellent. Then this can be understood by our SQFLITE. Good. Note, note, note. All right. Then next we need to return this result. After we've inserted, the data have to change. So we need to return this result here. So return the results. Return the results. Perfect. Okay. Then next is to also look at what? Our update operation. Since we have finished with the fetch, the insert, we need to look at the update as well. So update will be similar, like it will be very similar to this. And then let's look at this update. To update operation, we will update the note object. So here will be what? Update the note object to the database. Okay, good. So we'll be updating our note. And how are we going to do that? Instead of using the insert here, we're going to use the update note, update keyword here. So we use update note. Okay, then we'll still have our same parameter here, async, correct? And then here we only gonna have our variable database. So here will be var the db await this dot database. Okay, this database needs to be a small letter instead of a big letter here. Okay, then we have the result. So for the update, we have result.database dot update instead of insert. So update, and then what are we gonna update? We're gonna update first our table, that is the note table, and then our note should be converted to the map, right? And where should we update this? Where? So we use what we call the where keyword here. Where? We should update where, okay? So where will be, we should use our column ID to update, using that to update our database. So we call this where, and the where will be assigned to our column what? ID. So it checks the ID before it updates the table. So ID, and the ID is equal to which ID? We use the question mark to demonstrate that. Then after that, we have our where argument. Where argument to check the note and append it to the real ID. So where argument, where, which note do you want to change? So it uses the note dot ID to actually figure out the right ID inside our database. So this is perfect now. So we have the column of ID is equal to which ID, and where the argument is the note and appended by its ID. Then it can actually what update that. Then we return the result here. Perfect. Good. Then we go next to the what? The delete operation. Delete operation. And the delete operation is basically the same. But here, the delete operation, we need to also target the ID to help us figure out which one we are actually gonna delete, which note are we gonna delete. So here we also use the delete keyword here instead of the update. So we go delete and delete what? Note. And then this, no, here we don't use the same argument because we need to target the ID instead of the note. So we call int, that is the return type of the ID, int ID. And then here our var db will be equal to await dot database, correct? And then the result will be await dot, let's use the raw SQL to do this deletion using the help of our SQL language. So raw delete, and here inside here we'll write the SQL command to help us do the deletion. Okay, so inside here let's write our delete command. Delete, or delete script, delete from where? The note table, and the note table where note table where column ID is equal to the ID that we have selected, is equal to the ID. Perfect, like this. Good. So note table where our column ID is equal to the ID we have selected. Okay, so delete all from that. Perfect. And then we return the result. Now let's dive into our what? Our note object. So here, to do that, we simply have to convert all our what? Object here into what? The note object. So we need to first, let me write the comment here. We say get number of note. So number of note that we have, number of note objects. So objects in the database. So here, all it's gonna do is to count the number of nodes we have in our database and then return it. That is very simple. So if we update, we delete, and all that, this is gonna serve a purpose of always checking our database and then bringing out all the object inside our database and helping our application display. So we say this is get count. So we are getting the number of data inside our database. So we use the get count, and this will be empty. Get count async, and then we're gonna count what? Database. We're gonna count the database here. So we count everything inside our database here. So database here, and then we're gonna also convert this to what? To lists. and this list needs to be also be converted into a map object, because we said the SQFLITE can only what? Read object converted into the map what? The map list. So we did that here too as well, and we're gonna do similar thing here. Okay, so let me simply get database. Then we have the next one will be here. Here, instead of using all this, let me clear this and then let's get the understanding of this. Well, let me clear this. Okay, so first we are selecting or getting all the data inside our database, and then we need to convert it to a list, and this list needs to be a list also converted into a map object using the map here, and then the map needs to also return a string for our database column name, and then the other object inside our database should be dynamic because it can be an int or a string. We don't know which one is inside the database, and so we said all data will be represented by X, and that will be awaiting inside our database. And to await what? Our database dot a query. So we're gonna use the raw query, this one. And for our raw query, we will use the select query, and let's do this. So select count of what? All. Select count of all, make sure it's in a round bracket, all from this is a normal SQL query, so you pay attention to it, from our note table. That is very simple. Note table, like this. Perfect. Note table, and then you terminate this. Good. So we have converted our note object into a map, and then it's returning the string for the table column name, and then returning other objects in a dynamic format, being int or string. And then we select all by using the letter X, and then we use our wait keyword database.raw query, select count all from our note table. Perfect. And after that, we need to now return a result, and this it's gonna be an int result because it's a count, int result, and this will be equal to our special query using the SQlite dot first. So we have the SQlite dot first int value, this one, first int value, and then list. So which list? We have assigned our query list all to X value, so I put the X in here, then I terminate this. Then we now return our our value, that is the result. Perfect. Okay, so today what we studied was pretty much simple, but a lot of pack stuff in here. So here what we did is to, no, we don't need this. This was imported somewhere where we don't need. So what we did was to import our SQFLITE.Dart and also our asynchronous programming helper package, that is the Dart async, and then we also import our file helper, that is the IO file input and output file for our device. and we also provided this package for the path, and we also included our node class that we created in a previous video. Here we have the database helper, that is the class, and then we have a static database helper and then database. This is actually a single thing database helper. It means this database will be created only once in our mobile application, and then it will not create anymore, so we call it the single thing. Then we have a static, the database name, and it is a database, and we have a string of the name of this is a variable assigned to the name of our database, that is note table, that we have been using inside our code. We have been using this inside our code, and this note table is actually the name of our table, and then we have the ID representing the column of our ID of our table, and this title representing the column of our database, and this description representing the title of our database, and the priority and the date as well. Then we move on to the database helper instantiator. That is what we created here. So this factory returns help us to return something from our database helper. So we use the factory keyword. And so if our database helper is equal to null, means it's empty, then our database helper should actually create an instance of the database and return the database helper info. Okay, then here, using the future API, we said the future should get the database if we have not already instantiated. So if the database is empty database, await initialize database. That means create the database and then return the database. Then here we say, okay, so to initialize database, we need to have the path of our database for both OS, that is Android, and then for iOS. So we need to set the path of where our database will be created, and this is provided by a Flutter. And so we get application document.direct, the directory object, and then we have the path string returning path, and then the name of the file that is the database creating on our device here. Then next is we look at how to open or create a path in the database. So we say our note data is equal to open database. Looking at the path, it opens the database and also check the version. If it is not already created, then the onCreate will help us create the database right in our path or on our device. Then it will return the data in it. Good. So this onCreate will be done here. If there is no database, then create the database and then a new version of it, and then use the SQL query to actually create a new database on our device. If you install the application, this will run and then create this table and then name everything on your device so that you can actually create note. So this will help you to fetch data from a database. This will help you to insert, and this will help you to update, and this will help you to did we have to update? No, the last one is this will help you to delete from the database. Okay, so this is help you deleting from your database. Perfect. So this will help you to delete from your database, and this will get all the objects in the database and then count it in a row using the table name, and then this will return all the data in it in a map object for it to be read by our application. So this is the end of this video. We're gonna continue this in our next video. This is a bit lengthy video, but I require you to watch the previous one if you don't really understand the model class for the SQLite database. Peace, we are out.